It's my great honor to introduce those who are on this distinguished panel, who each and every one deserves a long introduction, but we will not do that. But I can tell you that they are educators in the truest sense of the word, each committed to student formation and the care and concern of institutions far and wide. To my left and to your right, Dutch Baughman is former Executive Director of the Division 1A Athletic Directors Association, a position that he just recently retired from. After participating in football, wrestling, and lacrosse at The Ohio State University, where he played for Woody Hayes, Baughman began his coaching and athletics administration career and has served at The Ohio State University, Northwestern University, Furman University, Virginia Tech, and Oregon State University. He recently retired after a career that was marked by care for the academic development of student athletes, education of future athletic directors, the promotion of increased diversity among college coaches, and support of all programs regardless of their size. Coach Grant Teaff is an icon at Baylor and beyond, Executive Director of the American Football Coaches Association and former head football coach at Baylor University. Teaff has been heavily involved in the administrative side of intercollegiate athletics and has served on several key NCAA committees. His career as a college coach has placed him in 8 Halls of Fame, including the Texas Sports Hall of Fame and the College Football Hall of Fame. He coached his teams to 170 victories and 2 Southwest Conference championships. He was Coach of the Year 6 times in the Southwest Conference and received National Coach of the Year honors from the American Football Coaches Association and the Football Writers Association of America. In 2006, Coach Teaff was honored with the Amos Alonzo Stagg Award by the AFCA. Nina King is Deputy Director of Athletics for Administration and Legal Affairs and Chief of Staff in the Athletics Department at Duke University. King has oversight responsibilities for the department's Human Resources Office, Recreation and Physical Education, and the development and execution of all department contracts. She also acts as the liaison to the University Legal Counsel Office and serves on the NCAA Division I Committee on Institutional Performance. She also co-teaches a sports business course in Duke's Fuqua School of Business as part of Duke's MBA program. And finally, Judge Ken Starr. Judge Starr is President and Chancellor of Baylor University and also serves on the faculty of the Baylor Law School. He has had a distinguished career in academia, the law, and public service. As Solicitor General of the United States from 1989 to 1993, he argued 36 cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. He's taught constitutional law at a number of institutions, including at Pepperdine Law School, where he held the position of the Duane and Kelly Roberts Dean and Professor of Law before coming to become Baylor's president in 2010. I want to, in advance, tell these 4 how much appreciation and gratitude we have for their presence, but also for their service to college athletics over the years. In particular, I want to express appreciation to Judge Starr for his affirmation of this conference and for the ways in which he has supported, both in word and deed, the work of the Institute for Faith and Learning. So for those things, we're very grateful. To moderate this session, it's my great honor to introduce to you L. Gregory Jones, Greg Jones, who is the Ruth W. and A. Morris Williams Jr. Professor of Theology and Christian Ministry at Duke University and Senior Strategist for Leadership Education at Duke Divinity School. Dr. Jones, I'm happy to announce here publicly, has also been recently appointed as Senior Advisor in the Institute for Faith and Learning and will be working with us. Dr. Jones is a friend and a colleague. Between 1997 and 2010, he served as the 11th Dean of Duke Divinity School. He's an internationally known theologian whose work centers on forgiveness and Christian higher education and social innovation and leadership. and he serves as Senior Strategist for the Fuqua Coach K Center on Leadership and Ethics at Duke's Fuqua School of Business. One of the great things about Greg Jones is he asks some of the best questions that can be asked, and he's an ideal person to moderate this panel. The conversation will range as long as it needs to with respect to our time commitments. If we have time, there are cards on your table, and you are invited to write questions that we would entertain if we do have time for those. Right now, please welcome these and Greg Jones.
Thank you, Darren. It's a great joy to be here and to be associated with the Institute of Faith and Learning and to have such an extraordinary panel this afternoon. One of the distinctive things that I think most of us know about higher education in the United States is the role that athletics plays in American universities that is distinctive in relation to the rest of the world. It's not as if places in England, Oxford, and Cambridge aren't aware of rowing and other intercollegiate athletics, but not at the same scale or level as is found in the American system of higher education. We have 4 people this afternoon who are exceptional leaders from a variety of backgrounds in that higher education. And yet, there are persistent calls to say that sports ought to be taken out of higher education, intercollegiate athletics, that somehow it's at odds with the fundamental mission of higher education. So I want to just open with a broad question for all 4 of you to answer. And I'll begin, Dutch, at your end and move this direction. But you've been invested in the intersection of higher education and athletics. What is it that you think is valuable about sports in higher education? How does it help educate and form people for diverse vocations of leadership?
Well, thank you, Dr. Jones, and thank you for the invitation to be here today. This is a very impressive program. Also, I want to take just a second to acknowledge a dear friend and colleague that's with us this afternoon, Ian McCaw, Director of Athletics here at Baylor. Ian, if we forget anything today, you help us out, okay? All right. Dr. Jones, that's a great question, and it's one that anybody in athletic administration deals with over their entire career. I've learned that a big part of it is on the part of the athletic administrators to help educate others outside of that culture to exactly what it is that goes on within intercollegiate athletics. Those within our profession understand that we are part of the fabric of the academy and that what we do happens to be a business enterprise within the academia. But over all these years, there's been no doubt that intercollegiate athletics provides a myriad of very valuable purposes to higher education and the institution. For example, athletics is one occasion where the alumni will come back. You don't typically see alumni coming back to a campus for other kinds of activities, but they will come back on their campus for athletic events. I think also the fact that the athletic department will align with a conference and therefore affiliate with the members of that conference is a very valuable purpose for higher education and for that institution. There's been record after record discovered over many, many years that donors to universities, typically, I think it's 80% of the university donors began their donation and their development tendencies through athletics. So it's that window, it's that porch for the university. It's a rallying point for the student body. Any particular contest, you look into the audience and you'll see representatives of the student body there, and it's one thing students can come together in an exciting atmosphere and support. I learned from my college coach who kept records on this, but he discovered that in the years that we would win a conference championship or have a very, very good season or go to a bowl game, the number of applications for enrollment at that institution increased the following year. And that was the case virtually every year that football program had success. I think it's valuable to higher education because participation in sports teaches things. It teaches very valuable lessons that are complementary to what needs to go on in the classroom. Student athletes need to be prepared in the classroom. They need to be prepared in their sport. Anticipation is a very important lesson that has to be learned and managed. Achievement, how do you handle achievement? And in athletics, you have to learn how to handle failure. How do you get up and keep going? How do you go again? The measure of a real champion. Focus. Student athletes learn they must focus on their particular skills in their particular sport, which is a lesson that's very, very valuable in the classroom. They learn to be present. When they go on their team and their competition, practice, whatever, they have to be there. They have to mentally, physically be there, be present at that time in order to perform properly. Same is true when they go in the classroom. They have to manage the expectations that they clearly understand that are upon them as a student athlete and as a student. And they have to manage a schedule. You know, we have a 20-hour rule in intercollegiate athletics, and one thing we've learned over the years is typically student athletes perform the best in their classroom in the season of their competition because it's important, it's necessary for them to manage their schedules so that they can maintain the obligations of their team as well as performing in the classroom. I also think it's very valuable to higher education because there's so many lessons learned in sports that supplement what goes on in the classroom. Teamwork. Years ago, our profession developed a program to help student athletes prepare themselves, develop the skills to engage in interviews and so forth, to go into the business world or whatever after graduation. And in talking to the corporate leaders every year that would come onto the campus to conduct these interviews, they would always ask to speak with student athletes. So I would ask them, why is that? Well, I learned from them that the values they see, the lessons learned from student athletes. It's not necessarily the case that non-athletes don't learn these valuable lessons, but you can be sure in athletics they will. Teamwork, perseverance, determination, performance in the face of adversity. Those are all lessons you learn in athletics that will help them in the classroom. Dr. Jones, believe me, I could go on, but I think that's the top of it.
Thanks. Grant?
Well, the question is, why do you believe sports are a valuable part of higher education? I have been involved in higher education the better part of my life, actually, both as a student athlete and then as a coach. I've coached on all levels, and so when we speak of higher education, we're not just talking about the 5 power conferences. We're not just talking about the Big 12. We're talking about higher education that goes throughout this nation, all divisions, FBS level, FCS level. That's what's the old Division II. Then you go to Division III, then you have NAIA, you have your junior colleges. So higher education is very, very broad in this nation. I spent 36 years coaching all of those years except one. I was coached in high school 1 year, have been in higher education. And it was always interesting because I started out in what is now referred to as Division III. Then we moved to a Division II type program. Then I went to Texas Tech, had experience in West Texas as an assistant football coach, came back to Baylor, and I served here for 21 years. The last 22 years I've been involved in higher education through the American Football Coaches Association. As was stated by Dr. Jones, if there's been a committee, I've been on it. And as we all know that do those things, that is quite telling on one physically and mentally. And particularly when you are in a position to fight for the things that you believe are important for the sport that you're involved in, for the folks that are involved in that sport. In one case, the student athletes, the others, those coaches and assistants. This right now is a bad time for me. I feel really depressed a lot. And the reason is, and we haven't even entered barely into November, and we've had 10 division FBS level coaches either resign or fired. The pressure is huge. That is not the question. That's not what we're talking about. But the totality of sports in higher education is broader than students going to the game and being enthused and being involved. And that's very, very important, by the way. But it's much more than that. Frankly, sports on the higher education level, doesn't matter what division, I saw it in all divisions, are the window by which the world looks at your university. Right now at Baylor University, our window is clear and clean, and what people see inside of that is what everybody would wish for. You know, dominance. They wish for competitiveness. They wish for victory and challenges that are overcome, which are in part of that. And students and folks out there that support the university, not just alumni, but those that support the university, have great gratification for the success. Now, here's the thing that is so important. The advent of television, and I lived through all of that, the lawsuits, and Dutch did too, and how things were formed about the television, and what happened back then is directly related to what we have now. I haven't counted them, but on any week, and now in the middle of the year when the MAC conference starts playing on Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, we play on Thursday just like Baylor played this last Thursday. Baylor will have a Friday game later in the year with TCU. So the dominance of television has really made an impact on this nation for football, and not just played on the higher levels. The divisions now are on television, but the national television, that exposure is given, you cannot put a price tag on that. The millions and millions of dollars that would have to be paid for the recognition that a Baylor University has gotten and a Duke University has gotten, it has opened up the world to see those. Those children out there that are watching, and all of a sudden they say, that's where I want to go to school. Little kids. And that's what their dream is, and they'll end up doing it. I have somebody on my staff that lives in Chicago, works with our foundation, and he has a daughter that's enrolled at Baylor now. She came here sight unseen because she heard about it through us and her dad and his coming down here, but she told me the television, watching the students and the excitement that they had. One of the things that drew her was what Baylor does, and our judge leads them in. And I pray for you every day, Judge, when you go in there. I'm afraid you'll get trampled one of these days. He leads them in, but I've noticed you put a little distance between you and the staff there, the group.
Cheer, Coach. More each year.
But this is something that all of us need to understand when we talk about sports on particularly the higher level. What that does for a university, and that's not right. Baylor has probably one of the top law schools in America, no question about it. Our business school is outstanding, and the new building that we have, all of those things are great, and they attract people that are interested in that. But your athletics are the broad window by which the world views you. And when you're playing good, when you are successful, that just translates to successful for that university, particularly if the university tries to keep up in the area of facilities. This is huge, and it takes money. And where does the money come from? The money comes from the opportunity to participate in a top conference, and the television money has driven what you bring in and what your budget is. My last year at Baylor University as athletic director and head football coach, my budget was $7 million for the total athletic program. It's a lot more than that now, I can tell you. But this is one of the things that you have to understand about athletics and higher education. And a lot of people, and I've talked to many, that do not particularly cater to the concept of the importance of athletics. And that's their okay, that's fine, if that's what they want to think. But I have lived it. I have seen it. I know it inside out. And it is extremely important to a university. And the investment that those alumni and friends of the university make pays huge, huge dividends. And that money that comes in can be used for a lot of different things. But what it does, it opens the spigot so that the money can begin to flow in. And then it can be directed. They come in and get interested in the university in totality. I've experienced it in many, many ways. We beat LSU in the Liberty Bowl. There's a couple, they didn't have any children, lived over in Louisiana. In fact, they lived where the University of, well, LSU was. And so we beat LSU in the Liberty Bowl, and their name was Al and Dorothy Heyer. And when I left the dressing room, they were waiting for me. And both of them were in tears because the last time Baylor had played LSU, Baylor lost 60-0. And so for all of those years, and it had been many years, they had taken abuse about Baylor. They were number 4 in the nation, and so when we beat them, it was such a magnificent feeling that they had. So when I walked out, they just said, "Oh, thank you, Coach. You know, we can now go home. We can abuse those that have abused us." But then they said, "Coach, we don't have any children, and we follow Baylor football, and we just want you to know we made a decision tonight. We're going to give, when we are gone, we're going to give what we have to Baylor University football." I said, "That's so nice. Thank you so much." I got back to the room. My wife said, "What were you talking with the Hires about?" And I said, "Well, they were very excited, very happy. And one other thing, they're going to leave Baylor football, whatever they have. They have no children." She said, "Well, what do you think that'll be?" I said, "Goodness, they own a big bottling company down there. You know, 200,000 or 300,000 at least." Well, I think to the last count, it was around 40,000 or more that's come in. You know why? Yeah, 40 million. Yeah, not 40,000. That's his job to keep up with the numbers there. No, that's true, about 40 million or more. And that type of thing happened all the time. I mean, it was amazing. I came here and we had no facilities. There wasn't a blade of grass on the football field. Had wooden bleachers and the stickers, or the deals were sticking up and people had to break them off to sit down. And no weight room. And so I told Judge McCall, I said, "I got to have a weight room, Judge. If we're going to beat Texas, I got to have a weight room." He said, "What do you think it'll cost?" I said, "I can put one out under the stadium, concrete blocks. I know some people, I can get them for cost, weights, and we can build a program." He said, "Well, how much?" I said, $50,000. He said, "Well, if you can raise it, you can build it." I just got here. I didn't know doodly, you know. So there was a guy that worked in development who loved football, and he came by. He goes out and raises money. I was a little forlorn looking, I guess, in my room, and he said, "Coach, what's wrong with you?" I said, "I got to have $50,000. The judge said I can build a weight room, but I don't even know who to talk to." He said, "Let me look around." A week later, he calls me. His name is Charlie Jones. Charlie said, "Coach, I got you the money, but I don't think you'll take it based on what your stand is about a lot of things." I said, "Well, come over to my office right now." So he came over and he said, "I got it, Coach, but you won't take it." I said, "Won't you try me? See if I'll take it." He said, "Well, Coach, it's $50,000 in Anheuser-Busch stock." I said, "I'll take it. The devil's had that money long enough." So we built a weight room. But that just, here's a little lady that had $50,000 in stock, and she wanted to give it to a football program that hadn't beaten anybody in many, many years. Why? Because the combination of football and athletics, or football and folks that care, has an effect. And so I have seen it, and I'm so thankful that we have at Baylor University and every place that I've coached that opportunity to bring people together. The last thing I want to say about it is when I came in here, we had alumni, we had the Dallas group, We had the Austin San Antonio group, and we had the Houston group. And they all didn't think alike. And one of the things that finally united them was the success on the football field. When we won the championship in 3 years, and by the way, I promised the freshmen when I came in, I didn't even know what I was doing. I promised the freshmen that we'd win a championship before they graduated. 2 years later, we won the championship, first time in 50 years. That, I saw, changed Baylor University, and it changed the giving habits. Judge can go back and look and see what our total endowment was at the time when I came in, and then see how it's grown through the years. And so much of it had to do with success in athletics. I'm anxious to talk about the value of athletics to student athletes in a moment, but I'll allow the question to pass on.
Nina.
Yeah. First, I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity to be here, and to be in the company of these esteemed gentlemen is truly an honor. I don't think I have anything else to say. Coach has it all. That was great. Really, just to kind of touch on what both Dutch and Coach have mentioned, sports means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It's varsity athletics, it's recreational athletics, club sports, intramurals, it's Division 1, 2, 3, NAIA. It's so many different things, but there is one common thing across all of those genres. Sports unites people. It provides an invaluable education to the student athletes that are playing for our universities. And as these gentlemen said, it is the front porch of the university. It's an institutional advancement tool, and we use it. Our donors, we're cultivating them, we're stewarding them, and we're really making special relationships with people that, with our benefactors for our universities via sport. And it's amazing. As administrators and coaches, we have a wonderful opportunity to go to work every day and work with these student athletes that are at our institutions to get an education, both academically and athletically. I think it's really important that we watch and maintain the balance between academics and athletics. Because as I said, these kids are coming to our schools really to kind of double major in athletics and academics. They want to win on the field, they want to win championships, but they want to graduate and they want to excel in the classroom. And so it's really up to us to provide the very best experience to these student athletes that are coming to our institutions to do that. Via sport, again, as Dutch said, these student athletes are learning so many life lessons. Now, I am the most unathletic person ever. Never played sports growing up, didn't play in college, and this is my career. And I am so passionate about it, and I have learned so much from these kids. And I really have seen the benefit of being a student athlete. As I said, they're learning these life lessons. Employers are not shy about saying they want to hire student athletes because of the work ethic, the dedication, the resilience, all of those things that they're learning being a member of a team in our university. But again, we can't place too much pressure on being a student athlete. We need to make sure that we're maintaining the proper balance between academics and athletics, and while we are running these athletic departments. And I don't remember which of you said, but we are a wannabe profit center encapsulated in academia, in a nonprofit environment. And so we need to be really careful that we maintain the educational aspect of what we are doing. So not much more to add than these gentlemen, but it's my sense on sport.
Thanks, Nina. Ken, you were batting cleanup in this initial question.
They're all on base. I think they've all hit home runs. Bases are empty. Well, let me begin with an additional word of welcome to each of you. I see some dear Baylor brothers and sisters here. So glad that they are here, but even more so, we're so thankful for our visitors, and we hope that we are extending to you the warm hand of fellowship and Baylor hospitality. As befits being a servant leader at a Christian university, let me begin by saying that in Scripture there are 22 references to running a race or some athletic competition. And I think what that tells us is there's something fundamental human about competition on the playing fields, in the gymnasium, and so forth, that it is a vital form of human activity and, I believe, human flourishing. Even if we aren't athletically gifted, even if we had to give up, as I did, football in Texas in the 9th grade for painfully obvious reasons. I'd like to say it was due to an injury. It had to do everything with lack of ability, lack of speed. So I tried to invoke Vince Lombardi and so forth. That did no good whatsoever. And so I took up a career in debate or something like that. But in any event, let me reflect on the athletic program, our 19 athletics program, but I think this is transferable and applicable regardless of whether one is in a power conference or not. I begin with a story. It's a charming story. It is a true story. That the Yale football coach gave a version of the St. Crispin's Day speech to his young men before they took to the field against Harvard. Gentlemen, you're now going out to play football against Harvard. Never again in your whole life will you do anything so important. Now, Shakespeare would have been more elegant about it, and Henry VI and the St. Crispin's, but you get the idea. This is very important, and it's not only important to those student athletes who, important note, have a higher graduation rate across America than non-student athletes. I think we do ourselves a great service in higher education when we lift up that fundamental and indisputable fact. That is data that tells us that something powerful is underway. It tells us that the kind of values that have been lifted up here are inculcated in school and institution, whether it's a community college baseball team or it's the Ohio State, or Coach K and Duke basketball. And we think of those who have gone through athletic programs and who have truly done fabulous things. Let me bring it, since we're in the football season, to a couple of comments. I was going through the transition process in the spring of 2010, and wise persons here at Baylor said you need to make the following calls. And high on the call, not to ask for financial support, would really get advice and counsel, and I was eager for it. So I found myself in the living room of a recently retired head of the tax department at Fulbright and Jaworski, now has a different name. And this is a gentleman who will be well known to many people in the room, and especially to our beloved Coach Teaff. So I said to Fred Cameron in his living room in Houston, Fred, you served on the Board of Regents, you're a renowned lawyer around the nation. By the way, to be a tax lawyer, you've got to be very smart. You obviously have these great analytical powers, you've accomplished much and so forth. I need your advice, and you also served with great distinction on the Board of Regents, our Board of Trustees, here at Baylor University. What advice do you have for me? Fred Cameron, win some football games. I thought he was joshing. I said, no, I build up the physics department, or what about our honors college? We got engineering. He said, no, I'm serious. Win some football games. Now, what he was saying is, and here are the three words that I use in connection with this activity: enthusiasm, unity, and energy. Those three values to the extended family flow out of athletic success generally, but especially in the big four sports, and we all know that football is king. Red McCombs, the legendary Red McCombs, who is a great benefactor of the University of Texas at Austin, the renowned business school at UT Austin bears his name. Sad story, he began as a football player at Baylor University and was cut from the team. Don't you just hate that when things like that happen? But the rest is all history. Red continues to love Baylor, but here's now the relevant point. At breakfast with him in San Antonio, he said, I had a study done. On football success, this echoes what Coach Teaff said, and giving to the university, not to the athletic program, but to the university. And there is, in fact, a very close correlation. It is demonstrable over years that when the football team, when the Longhorns went at football, giving across the university goes up. I love the story of the Hires family, moved to tears and moved to this act of great generosity, all by virtue of what? The restoration of athletic success. Final story I want to tell actually comes not from football, but from tennis, especially in light of some of the comments made, Greg, Dr. Jones, that you made about the sporting world, the collegiate sporting world outside the United States. In my very first year here, our tennis coach, men's tennis coach, and we have a wonderful tennis program, said, would you come over and meet with our student athletes and watch them in practice for a little bit and then just have a conversation? I said, of course. And so I go over, they in practice, and we go in. And he said, okay, just tell us about your impressions. I said, oh, I love Baylor. It's a great place. I didn't have the good judgment to go here, but I'm so glad and thankful to be here and so forth. And then I started hearing from the student athletes, all members of that team, save for one, were from outside the United States. That's not unusual for tennis programs, at least for the most outside, because tennis is a truly global international sport, as we all know. Each one of the internationals said something to this effect. I'm so grateful to this country. I'm so grateful to Baylor, because only in the United States could I receive or pursue higher education and play the sport that I love. And this is Europe, including Eastern Europe, and it was Latin America, several different countries. I would have had to have made a choice. Do I want to play tennis, or do I want a higher education? So I would then close with one of the things that Coach Teaff noted now for our students. To connect in such a powerful way with the university in such an emotional way, the highs and the lows, the victories, the defeats, and you see it on television or you experience when you go to an athletic event. Energy, excitement, enthusiasm. Nothing comes close. It provides a lingua franca at the faculty dining area. What will you talk about if you find yourself from the Department of Physics with someone from the Department of English? You may find that the lingua franca is what just happened last evening at the football game. Or what's happening with our Lady Bears. Isn't it amazing? Did you see what the Lady Bears did? How they beat Texas A&M at Commerce by about 70 points, 60 points? Yeah, I sure did. So they may not be talking about quantum physics or about Shakespeare, but they do have a lingua franca that brings the whole community together.
Thank you. I want to move from kind of the broader value of sports to the way it's changing. And we've got, in some sense, 3 generations. And so I want to begin, Dutch and Grant, you all have had more than a couple of years of involvement and leadership in intercollegiate athletics over the course of a career. Both of you are recently retired from a variety of activities. What's changed in intercollegiate athletics? What's changed for the better? And what's gotten worse, or at least more complicated?
Where to begin? As Darren and Dr. Jones just mentioned, I'm transitioning into retirement right now. Began my experience in intercollegiate athletics about 1967. So there's been a long period of time here to really observe and be part of the fabric of something that is so important to me personally and something that I sustain such a passion for. So as these changes have occurred, I've been involved in these things, and it's hard not to live them personally as each one of them occurs. I've learned as I've approached this period of retirement, this stage in my life, there's there's thoughts, there's things you think about that perhaps you never thought about before. Those thoughts seem to be more important than they were before. But one of the thoughts I've had in the past year, 18 months, is exactly what this question is, Dr. Jones. What's happened over this period of time? It's just a snapshot of time, but it's my time. It's what I've experienced personally over this period of time. Right at the top of the list would be Title IX. I recall in 1974 when Birch Bayh proposed this Title IX, it was a foreign concept. It was pretty bizarre, and some of the older athletic administrators and coaches that I knew at that time were signaling the death knell. We'll never survive this. It's the wrong thing for us to be doing, this Title IX. It was exactly the right thing for us to be doing. And one of the things that was so privileged at that time was that I actually began to study the history of intercollegiate athletics to better understand what impact would this Title IX have on this enterprise of intercollegiate athletics that I love so much. And I read about Mabel Lee in the Ivy League. I read about pioneers and leaders in women's athletics. I was absolutely blessed that at Ohio State, and I was there, you see, before it became the Ohio State University. We did use face masks, and I did not have a leather helmet. But it was not the Ohio State University at that time. But at Ohio State, there was a lady named Phyllis Bailey. Phyllis Bailey was the pioneer in higher education in recreational sport. She's a person that was applauded by virtually everyone, especially at that time, for the pioneer work, for the groundwork that she did to blaze the trail for something like Title IX to occur. So what I learned was there's this new Title IX, but there's so much that has gone on before this point in time in the early 1970s, 1974. So that helped me to better understand the importance and significance of Title IX. And to this day, Title IX continues to weigh heavily on decisions being made in athletic departments and gender equity and so forth, as it should. I believe the perspective or the lens through which we look at Title IX has changed from one administration to the next over this period of time. But nevertheless, the importance and the significance is there, and it's real. Another key development is what I've observed in the evolution of the development of the professional skills of athletic administrators and coaches. In the mid and late 60s, athletic directors were retired coaches. Typically, the retired football coach who had been very successful and was admired and respected by the alumni and the university and so on and so forth, but he was a football coach. And that was the norm. But as this enterprise continued to develop, and there's many reasons and many moving parts that developed over time, the role of that athletic administrator, that athletic director, changed significantly to the point that that person had to become skillful in so many other areas that were not being developed necessarily as a successful coach might have. There was much more business orientation. There were so many other things that came into play. So all of a sudden we started to see a transition where the athletic director became a person who had some kind of training or preparation in other areas to become the person in that seat. It also became more and more important for the athletic director to understand, just as has been mentioned a couple times, that their role and their purpose within that institution may look to be contrary to the mission of that institution. But yet the athletic director knows better than anybody that mission is within the academy. There's much been written, much been said about the disconnect that occurs in many universities between athletics and the institution. I can tell you within Division 1A in particular, there's not a single athletic director that doesn't understand the importance of that. And they strive to find every way they can to ingrain themselves into the institution. But the actual role, the things we see today, when a president of a university is conducting a search for an athletic director today, it is so far away from what it was at the beginning of my career. That is a very significant change because, most importantly of all, whomever that person's going to be, the influence in a positive way they have over the well-being of student athletes and to help coaches find success, there's nothing more important than that. But yet, this is a person that has to understand the business end of the profession today. We've always had some measurement, some metric within intercollegiate athletics regarding grade point average in relation to the eligibility of a student athlete to participate. So there's always been a connection with the grades earned. We've also seen this forever in the recruiting process. Prospective student athletes have had to maintain, they've had to achieve a certain grade average to be eligible to be recruited to become a freshman in college. We finally, in the late 80s, began to see that in addition to that academic achievement metric, we were going to ingrain the significance of graduation rates. I think the big news this week from the NCAA is they just released their most recent graduation rate study. And what they've discovered is that once again this year, the success of student athletes across the country to reach graduation has increased once again. I believe it's 86%, something like that. Astounding, incredible, but as it should be. One other thing that we've seen evolve, not only the professional development of the athletic administrators, but the evolution of coaches. At the beginning of my career, to have a coach like I had in college was astounding. I mean, it was just remarkable. But if you saw the coaches of other sports programs, especially with the introduction of Title IX, all of a sudden the institution would be required to maintain athletic programs in sports other than football, men's basketball, women's basketball. So who were going to coach these new teams that we saw? At that time, back then, the people that were most qualified to teach those sports programs were women that had evolved from the GAA or the WAA, the Girls Athletic Association, the Women's Athletic Association. They were the most experienced people, and they became the coaches early on. Then as that continued to evolve, the student athletes that had benefited from those better programs developing became the coaches. Then we saw Olympians become coaches, especially of women's programs. And now we've reached a point where one of the battles within our profession is that so many coaches today in the women's programs are men. And there's great debate over that particular issue in and of itself. But the fact is that over this period of time, there's been a distinct evolution of who the people are that are coaching the student athletes. I would have to say too, Dr. Jones, as I started thinking about this, I started making a list of what are the most significant developments over this period of time, and which ones are better and which ones may be more complex or worse. I'm an extremely positive person, and I disappointed myself to see that my list had more things that were highlights that I think made us worse. Compensation of coaches and administrators made us worse. If you talk to coaches and administrators, they would disagree, obviously. They would be the ones that would oppose that statement the most. But the residual impact of that happening has been profound. Now, on the one hand, I would say that our profession was long overdue to improve the compensation provided to coaches in particular. As Coach Teaff and I were talking before, my college coach in his early years of coaching made $28,000 a year. But you see, that had nothing to do with why he was coaching that football team. So this level of compensation, another problem with the compensation today, if you're an athletic director, at many universities in our country today, you have to go out in the marketplace and hire a football coach. For a long period of time, you might have opportunity to hire an offensive or defensive coordinator from school XYZ. Today, those offensive and defensive coordinators are making so much more than your head football coach can make. You can't talk to those people anymore. They're not interested in your job. So on the one hand, there's a couple of these things. On the one hand, there's been real value and benefit, but I think it's also hurt us. Facilities is one. How stunning is it to come down 35 and you come over the hill and you see McLean Stadium? My goodness, how impressive is that? But to know what goes into that and to see across the country the importance of facility development, facility improvement. We have to be somewhere between that $50,000 weight room under the stadium and cinder blocks and what we see going on in many schools around the country who are caught up in the arms race. Freshman ineligibility. I was ineligible as a freshman, and it was wonderful. That has changed significantly now. Now we have all these reasons why we don't think it's right for freshmen to be ineligible. And I think back how silly all of that is. Because as an ineligible student athlete, I wasn't disconnected from my team by any means. I was at practice every day. But I was also in a position where my focus was much more on the transition from being away from home, from being out of high school, to now being in college, and all that goes with that transition and the impact of it. So freshman ineligibility, in my opinion, is not a bad thing, but it's changed. Another thing that's changed greatly is the method by which media do their business. Early on, as a young coach, a reporter would call and say, I want to talk to you about a topic. We'd make an appointment, they would come in, and we would sit for 20 minutes and talk about whatever the topic was. And then the reporter would say, okay, I think I'm ready now. Then they would begin their questions. That's not what we have today. It's more likely the contact an athletic director or coach is going to get is from someone writing a blog who has already written the story, and they just want a couple of your quotes to fill in. So that has changed so much, and with that, you have to include social media. I was tickled to see Judge Starr I learned this week that because of the discomfort that many of the presidential candidates have with the anticipation of dealing with media, a couple of them in particular have started a process of answering questions through their Facebook page. Facebook page. What happened in Egypt a couple years ago when it disrupted? How did the information get out of Egypt about what was going on in Egypt? Social media. But at the same time, this impact. We had a lady come to our annual meeting for Division 1A a couple years ago. She's an expert in the area of social media. And she stood there and explained to us how social media has become the primary method of communications for the age group that we are most interested in, the prospective student athlete age group up through college. And most of the older people in athletic administration didn't grow up with that. We're not savvy to social media, but you better snap into it real quick because the impact of it is extremely real, and it's one of the major things that's happened. Television, sports talk radio. As Coach mentioned, we have a situation now where an outside entity determines when a football game is going to be played and how much money is going to be derived from participation in that particular game. Sports talk radio. We never used to have that. An anonymous caller can call into a sports talk radio show and say the most outrageous claims. They can make them personal toward another individual. And the people on the air will actually talk about it. And if someone is named, they have to defend themselves, whether it's been proven or not. Another major change, the attitude of student athletes. I can remember as a young freshman being ineligible, showed up on campus, and we might talk to our freshman colleagues about what are they going to major in. I think the fact that freshmen are eligible in men's basketball right now is a terrible thing. And if we had freshman ineligibility in men's basketball, they might not want to be jumping to the NBA after 1 year. What is a higher education experience supposed to be all about? Give them a year of college experience so they can go to the NBA? No, that's not it at all. The role of alumni has changed significantly. Used to be that especially the members of your board of directors, your board of trustees, whomever, whatever your governance structure is, their allegiance was so much to your university that it was unwavering. Today, they listen to sports talk radio, and they're engaged in social media, and the athletic director gets questions and comments from those people at that level of influence regarding the same kinds of things that you can read any day on sports or on social media. Now this one is I want you to listen to this one carefully because I don't want to be misunderstood on this one, but diversity. When Title IX occurred and we all became much more educated and realized it was absolutely the right thing to do, we moved strongly in that direction. It took time. It's like turning the battleship. It was difficult. But then we reached a point in the mid-'80s where the NCAA adopted a sense of purpose toward diversity. Now, please understand, I am an advocate of diversity. I could give you examples of things that have occurred over my entire career to support that. But here's what's happened. When diversity became the sense of purpose at the NCAA, we all understood what it was. We all understood what the meaning of it was and the importance of it, the significance of it, and that we needed to embrace it. But like the word leadership, like the word ethics, diversity has been randomly thrown around by so many people. So often it has come to mean so many things. The meaning we understood in the mid-'80s has been diluted so much that the importance and significance of what diversity means to intercollegiate athletics, I believe, has been lost. It means something else today, and that's a shame. That's a real shame.
Thanks. Dutch, if I could just ask you to go on to Grant so we can get through everyone, if that's all right. Grant?
Believe me, I could go on.
Thanks.
Well,
wonderful insights.
Thank you, Dr. Jones. This is a very broad subject, and as you could tell, this could be an hour talk from all of us because of the experience we've had and what we've seen. I was right in the middle of integration, and I recruited the first minority student in Texas in 1960 at McMurray College, and I lived with it. We went to the first game. I had food ordered at a little town. Coming back, we pulled up, bus, got out. A young man that was a minority was right beside me. The owner of the cafe stepped out on the the porch as we were going in, stopped us and wanted to know if that person there is with you. That wasn't the language he used, but was that person with you? I said, well, yeah, he's a member of our team. Says he has to eat in the kitchen. I said, what? He has to eat in the kitchen. I said, he's a member of my team. The steaks were already on the table, chicken fried steaks. And I said, you're telling me, and my players were all around me at that time, you're telling me my player can't eat with his teammates. That's what I'm telling you, he said. I said, well, I hope you enjoy all those steaks. And we went back and got on the bus and drove home hungry. And every one of those players on that bus understood the significance of that act. They supported it 100%. So I've seen the beautiful change. It hadn't been easy, but diversity has come in a beautiful way. So many young men that I coached came and got an education at Baylor University because they had that opportunity. And their lives were changed, and their children's lives were changed, and it spreads, and it's significant. And athletics has been a leader in that change that's come about in our great nation. That's one of the positive things that I've seen. I want to say that going back to the student athlete, I was a student in Snyder High School. My parents were wonderful, wonderful examples of values and ethics and a work ethic. Both of them worked long hours. And so I saw that and I lived that. But when my coaches came in, they taught me something that was different, that I could win not only on the athletic field, but in life. I could be a success. It was important to get an education. So I set a goal to get an education, and I decided at that time I wanted to be like my coaches. I wanted to help change other lives like they were changing mine. So that started me on a path of education and dealing with young people and doing for others what had been done for me. And it has been an amazing trip. And it's something that is very key, because what we teach those young people then is transmitted to their own children and the players that they coach. One of my strong passions and missions at AFCA, we have around 12,000 active members, 15,000 that are on our email list of coaches. And from day one, my sermon, if you want to call it that, was that you have an important role in the lives of the young men. And here's what you must do. You must coach not only the game, but you must coach beyond the game. Those things that they will have to live with and deal with, those things that will make them better. And across America, that has changed, and it's changing more now. What's negative in America is our society is pulling our young people down. We have about 26 million children in America that do not have a father. 26 million. Those young people have not a role model. But when they come in, the teachers and the coaches become their role models. And the teachers and the coaches can change their lives. And it happens all across America every day. One of our major goals in AFCA, and this is one of the positive things coming out of athletics, is to teach beyond the game. And here's the message we give our coaches. If you preach a sermon, you better be willing to live what you preach, because if you're not living it, it has no validity. Young people today don't listen to your words. They watch you and how you live your life. And it's a really, really important thing that's going on in America now. In education and in athletics, we're making a strong effort to change our society back. Teach young people to be responsible. If you're going to have a child, you're responsible for that child. If you're going to get married, you're responsible for your marriage. And that's taught in athletics. You do it because they live it every day. There's a game that's lost, and you can go back and teach from that in a magnificent way. Then you turn a setback into a comeback by what you teach and what those players learn. They learn very much. They learn teamwork. They learn values. They learn a work ethic. Our society today has got their hand out. They want somebody to give them something. You have to teach to young people that if you want to achieve something in life, you can do it, but you're going to have to work to do it. You're going to have values. You're going to have to be willing to be responsible. not only for your own action, but for those around you. Play with your team and be successful. That will never change. A lot of things change. We've changed this country in many ways. I served on the original Title IX, and I can tell you some of those meetings would make the hair rise on the back of your neck. I was a football coach in a committee of some ladies that were very adamant about making change. They were right, and I supported them, but it was pretty tough, you know. But what a wonderful change has happened. That's good. I fear some of the negative things for our future. I think money is too much involved in what we're doing. I really believe that. I don't think it's good because some people get left out. I don't really feel that the Power Five is that good for all of college athletics because the money is coming in by and large to that particular group, and that's great. But there are those out there that are suffering, that are not able to do the things that they want to do for their student athletes. Right now, we have so many people working in athletics, and Coach Ian can do the numbers for you. But in those days when we were coming up and coaching, Coach did just all of it. You did the academics, you checked the rooms at night, made sure that they were there. You did the weight room, you did all of those things. There wasn't anybody to go ahead of you. If you wanted to get a bus, you had to work with your athletic director and get a bus to go to the team. All of that has changed, and that's good. But what we must always be careful about as we move forward, the student athlete is number one. That's the most important thing. Whether you win or lose, the involvement of the student athlete is the key. We've already heard today what it does for students in their academics. One of the reasons is we have support in academics. We have support in compliance, which is extremely important. That's changed. That is so important and so very, very workable. What our student athletes learn is they learn a sense of pride. One of the things that I tried to instill when I first came at Baylor, they had won 3 games in 5 years. They hadn't won a championship in 50 years, had no facilities. They were down. And the thing that I tried to instill through the team was this concept of pride. Pride in your university, pride in each other. That was our theme, Pride 72. And 2 years later, that helped transform a university and a team to a championship that had not been won in 50 years. And that changed, you talk about change, that changed this university irrevocably in a positive way, because that pride began to envelop in the fact that, yeah, we can beat people, we can win, we can be successful, we're good as anybody else, our university is good as anybody else, we can be successful. When that happens, there is a dynamic change in attitude, in giving, we've already talked about that, but more importantly, we see those involved, not just student athletes, accept the fact that they have something to be proud of. They want to stand up for it. They want to be involved in it. They want to give back when they go through that university. That's why you see the givings up. It's that pride that's instilled, and it comes because somebody's successful on the athletic field. We've got a lot of positive things in our upper level and our lower level of university, so to speak, and we must strive to make sure that we do that. We have issues right now in football. The concussion issue is extremely, extremely important right now. And we as coaches and groups, athletic directors, associations, we need to make sure, and we've been doing it for 20 years in AFCA, and that is to make sure that we teach the game as safely as it can be taught. We need to make sure that everything we do magnifies the safety of the student athlete. And there's a lot of folks working on it. There's folks over in her area that are doing studies and everything that will help us make it better. We lost 7% in football last year of youth football. And if you go check that out, most of it was because mama said, I don't want my baby to get a concussion. because there's so much written and talked about concussions. Actually, football is a safer sport than many other sports that are played. We are losing now on high schools across America. We're having high schools that cannot play football because they don't have enough athletes to play. So this is an important issue for all of us, not only for those student athletes. The heartbreak is to have an injury, and I've been through that. The heartbreak is to lose a player, and I've been through that. And so we, as those that are in charge and working with our sports and all sports, it's imperative that we make it safe. If it's safe, it can be successful, it can be enjoyable just as well, and through that, we make a difference in the lives of the young people that are learning all these other lessons.
Thanks. Judge, you actually are a sitting president in a Power 5 conference. Shortly after you became president of Baylor, there were massive conference realignments happening across the country in those Power 5 conferences. A lot of changes have happened in the 5+ years you've been president and now president and chancellor. What excites you most as a president dealing with intercollegiate athletics on a week-by-week, month-by-month basis beyond an 8-0 start in football and other programs? And what worries you the most, or what keeps you up at night most anxious about the current state of intercollegiate athletics?
What excites me the most is, as previously stated, the energy, the enthusiasm, the sense of unity, the sense of pride. I love what Coach Teaff just said about Pride 72. And that spreads, it goes beyond the team and the athletic program. It also excites me that our program, led wonderfully by Ian McCaw, continues daily to lift up the values of academic success, and I love your reference to double major. Along with athletic success, there must be academic success. One of my favorite events, and so it's one of the things that excites me, is going to the end of the year athletic banquet where the teams all gather. All 19 sports at Baylor University are well represented. We fill the Farrell Center. We break bread. We're around the table of fellowship. And then the program is entirely here are the academic accomplishments in these 19 sports. An evening given over to that. Nothing said about success in the sport itself, but entirely academic success. Football. It excites me when I hear our Coach Briles say to the young men, Coach Briles believes in speed. When your legs are gone, you will still have your education. Those kinds of values. This is one of the good things that the NCAA has in fact done, and Dutch, thank you for mentioning that. Just holding all institutions accountable for the academic progress of all student athletes and moving the culture to achieve that which the legendary president of the University of Oklahoma back in the 1950s and testifying before the Oklahoma State Legislature, these are the days of Bud Wilkinson and national championships year after year with the Sooners. You know, the Sooners are coming to town next week. I shouldn't be telling this story. And
it's no longer the 1950s.
Yeah, thank you. And so the president said, and this is testimony before the House of Representatives of the great state of Oklahoma, we are trying to build a university that our football team can be proud of. That was really said. It's become a bit of what shall I say, a joke. Now it is indeed, our university should in fact be proud of our football team and all of our 19 sports, and so should our student athletes. Very quickly, what keeps me awake at night, even though Ian, our wonderful athletic director, lifts up constantly, victory with integrity, the I word, victory. We want to win, but we want to win it with integrity. That was a rallying cry shortly after Ian arrived here. win, but win with integrity. And that brings me to my only point in terms of keeping me awake at night. Other than student-athlete welfare, but I think we care deeply here, and I think most colleges and universities do care deeply about the flourishing of our student-athletes holistically. Are we caring for them? And here as a Christian university, we can say we care about them spiritually and their faith walk and their opportunity to explore that, and sports chaplaincies and the Fellowship for Christian Athletes. And we want to come alongside our athletes in a powerful way. My point, compliance. Compliance is ubiquitous. At times, compliance reflects, what shall I say, just the most detailed, highly regulatory. It's a very highly regulated industry. And it is very easy, and here's an expert on compliance. It is very easy to be out of compliance. It is very easy to commit what the NCAA calls a secondary violation. I did it my first fall here. I didn't know I was violating it. But after church, I'm in line at McAllister's, our local little deli here, and there's Robert, RG3. He wasn't as famous then as he became. And his recently, it was announced, fiancée. So there's Rebecca. And they're ahead of me in line, and everybody here in the room will understand now my story. I signaled the cashier, and I thereby committed a secondary violation. You see, I could entertain Robert and Rebecca in our home, but I could not, and there's no de minimis rule that I know of. Perhaps there is. So I reported, that was Sunday after church, and I reported that thinking, maybe I did something wrong. And I must say, Robert, who I knew, kind of gave me a funny look, but he knew who I was. So I wasn't your classic booster. And I reported it to Ian the next day on Monday, and sure enough, Ian was kind enough to let a few minutes go by before calling back, yes, you just committed a secondary violation. This is a very highly regulated industry, and so compliance, meeting with our compliance officers, making sure that you have a very robust compliance program, but also a culture of compliance, a culture of integrity, a culture of honesty, that we turn square corners. It's like dealing with the IRS, except this is industry that's self-regulated. That keeps me awake at night.
Thanks. Nina, you've got a lot of your career yet ahead of you, and developing in athletics. What excites you about the future as you think about why you got into this vocation and exercise leadership and influence about it? And if you peer into a crystal ball, what do you think 2 decades from now is going to look like?
Wow. Well, first, can I respond to a couple of things that my fellow panelists said? In terms of compliance, I am no expert. My first job out of law school was as the director of compliance at Notre Dame. And so that was 8 years ago, and I don't do compliance day to day at Duke. And so if somebody asks me a compliance question, I am very quick to call the compliance office, because in my 8+ years out of it, the rule has changed 16 times. So I am not comfortable answering any compliance questions. But to Judge's point, I mean, we are so over-regulated, we can't remember what iteration of the rule we're in. I mean, the rules book is 400+ pages. I mean, it's as big as a New York City phone book. I mean, it's crazy. So, yeah, I mean, as an administrator, compliance also does keep me up at night. I mean, it takes hundreds of years to build up your reputation and 8 seconds to destroy a university's reputation. From a booster, a student athlete who wasn't thinking, I mean, anything can get destroyed pretty quickly. And then in terms of diversity, you know, I respect what you said, Dutch, but I really think that we do need to keep it as a word at the forefront of our everyday being. We have made great progress, but it's not enough. In terms of racial and ethnic diversity, I mean, you know, we're making sure we're interviewing minority coaches and administrators. We're so woefully behind in gender diversity. Of the Power 5 conferences, 65 institutions, we have 3 female athletic directors. There's nothing wrong with an athletic director, female, overseeing a big-time college football program. I know college football. I know how to be an administrator, so that shouldn't be a drawback for me being an athletic director. I mean, I'm learning the business and how to run the business and how to be an administrator. Coach isn't asking me to draw up plays or put me out there, so that doesn't need to be a concern that I'm a female. And so I think we need to keep diversity in the conversation. It's really important. And as young administrators are coming up, it's something I definitely try to stress within our department and create a culture of inclusivity and empower the females in our department to really, grow up in this business and become our future leaders at the highest level, because there is no reason that females shouldn't be. So those are in response to kind of what you gentlemen said. And in terms of the future, I mean, the fundamental purpose of college athletics, again, it's going to stay the same. It's providing a highly unique, one-of-a-kind, world-class experience to our student athletes in terms of athletics while they're working towards and hopefully getting a college degree. That's not going to change. And so for the future, we need to continue to evolve with social media and television and the big money. Those things aren't going away. The toothpaste is out of the tube. And so we need to adapt and run our athletic departments accordingly. There's a lot of things that are scary. The landscape is shifting. I think conference realignment kind of shook everything up, and here we go. I mean, it's a big jigsaw puzzle. And we are in some uncharted territory, and it's a little bit of rough waters. But as long as we have forward-thinking leaders that can navigate us through these turbulent times, we'll be okay. I mean, you gentlemen have seen, we've been through different iterations of the NCAA and governance and how everything works, and so things will settle down. I have confidence that things will settle down. Things that are kind of scary in terms of the future. Scary, but there are some good things that have come. Permissive legislation. I mean, now that we can provide student athletes with meals 24/7, these all kinds of things, stuff, swag. It's crazy what we can provide for these student athletes, and we're keeping up with the Joneses, and it's tough. Permissive legislation is costing us millions of dollars, but we're trying to keep up with the Joneses, at Duke at least. The facilities arms race that's been touched on, cost of attendance. Cost of attendance was the right thing to do, but it's costing us a lot of money. And so, the financial pressures of running a college athletic department are real. And I think that's scary as we move into the future, but something that we're constantly thinking about. The legal landscape in college athletics is out of control. There are numerous lawsuits in the system. I just saw in the headlines today, I didn't even have a chance yet to read the article, but another class action lawsuit was filed yesterday suing regarding transfer rules. We're a mess in that area. I mean, it's something that needs to be cleaned up and we need to figure out. But here we go, a high-profile lawsuit in the system that's going to be talked about for a long time, years to come. I mean, we're talking about O'Bannon, name, image, and likeness, and antitrust, unionization. What a scary thought that was while that was going on, but unionization of student athletes. So the legal landscape is something that really worries me as we look to the future of college athletics. But again, we can't stray from our values. We need to remember, as everybody up here has said, why we're here, and it's for the student athletes. Just keeping that at the forefront, our mission, we're providing high-class world experiences for these kids. And we're recruiting them at younger and younger ages, and while we're sitting in their living rooms and promising them everything at their fingertips. Come to our institution and here's what we will do for you. You know what? When they make that decision and they choose to come to a Duke, a Baylor, wherever it might be, we need to make sure that we are delivering on our promises from when we sat in the living room, over-delivering on our promises. The parents are entrusting their sons and daughters to us. Speaking of parents, that is something that's also changing. And in my short career in college athletics, athletics, I've seen that go a little crazy. I'm learning how not to parent my 3- and 4-year-old when they get to college. Helicopter parents and the sense of entitlement that we're providing our children is something scary. But I mean, we need to make sure that our student athletes are enjoying their experience, and their parents are as well. And so, I don't know the future. None of us do. And it's kind of scary to think about. I think college athletics is really even going to change in the next 5 years. The money is getting crazy. We're not going to be able to sustain. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of where it goes. One thing that I think, all of us up here would fight for is we need to make sure that we're preserving the Olympic sport experience. Sure, the big money is football and basketball. Revenues are driven 80% by football, 20% by men's basketball. But that money we're using to provide the fencer, the lacrosse player, the soccer student athlete with a great experience that they wouldn't realize anywhere else. These students are becoming Olympians. They're representing our country at the highest level. And so the Olympic experience and preserving the Olympic model, the amateur Olympic model that college athletics is set up to be, I think that's something that we really need to keep focus on as we move into the future. And it's a little bit scary with the dollars kind of compressing everything. At Duke, we have 26 sports. We're about to add our 27th sport. We were a little bit out of whack in terms of Title IX, just a little bit. It wasn't enough, but enough to make us take a step back and say, we need to provide more opportunities for women because it's the right thing to do. So in a time where it's not cool to be adding sports, a lot of places are cutting sports because of Title IX, which I think is a negative consequence of Title IX and quite unfortunate, but that's another conversation. At a time where it's not the big thing to do, the headline to do to add a sport, we are adding a 27th sport at Duke softball, and I am thrilled that we can provide more opportunities for young women on our campus. So kind of a quick view of the future from my little crystal
Can
ball.
I pick up on just one thing, and that is, and I'll be very brief on this, that the future of intercollegiate athletics, with all of the issues that have been identified, all the glories, all the difficulties, should not be decided by federal courts. And that's the trend line that we're on right now, and happily conversations are beginning. They're at a very early stage, but so we're in a fairly early stage in terms of intercollegiate athletics finding their way now into courtrooms in a way and an intensity that goes far beyond NCAA Board of Regents and so forth, that set the framework for greater competition, but also allowing conferences to organize and the like, notwithstanding the antitrust laws. But now, with the openings that Baughman has created, it's not surprising that we will have additional litigation. And so this is something that eventually policymakers, namely the Congress of the United States and the executive branch, will need to begin focusing on. For all of the issues facing higher education, this is of increasing importance. It's incredibly costly, the litigation that's unfolding, the judgments that may soon be unfolding if the state of the law remains as it is, at least in the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. So the future should be decided by policymakers and not by judges.
Thus saith the judge. We're almost out of time. I want to ask one final question, but I'm going to enforce a one-and-one rule, so you have one idea, and it's got to be articulated in less than 1 minute.
Whoa.
And I'm going to start with you, Nina. We talked about the formation of the student athlete, the double major, character, perseverance, resilience, leadership, teamwork, all the virtues. If you were czar over intercollegiate athletics in higher education, what is the one thing you would change to address a problem and improve the formation of character and leadership for student athletes in higher education? One thing, it has to be articulated in less than a minute, and I'll start with a cane yanking you off if you go longer.
Oh my goodness.
1 minute,
I
Nina,
didn't
then
want
Judge, then Grant, then Dutch.
Wow. I mean, I need more time to kind of wrap my head around this one. The dollars, we're out of control in terms of money and salaries, but we have to keep up with the Joneses. And so, I need, all of us. I mean, it's a white paper. It's a think tank. How do we control spending in the arms race in college athletics? I mean, that's my quick version, but
Great.
the thing that I most would like to change.
Nice narrow issue that has to be addressed. Thank you. Judge?
decrease student athletes' burdens, so that we provide adequate student athlete services, including nutrition. Footnote, the NCAA deregulation was so helpful that we can take better care nutritionally of our student athletes. It was scandalous that very Procrustean regulations had such ridiculous rules as a bagel is a snack, but if you add cream cheese, you have transformed that bagel into a meal. That is the level of regulation, and the NCAA recognizes this, I believe, increasingly, and is working to at least modestly deregulate. Let's take care of our student athletes.
Thank you. Grant?
I agree with what Judge said. Deregulation of some of the things that we're compelled to abide by make it very tough, and there are many of those, too long for a minute's worth. But I think from the standpoint of my looking at it and my position as Executive Director of the American Football Coaches and listening to our coaches out there, one of the major concerns I have is that we are creating, particularly on the upper level, and then that transcends to the lower group, an uneven playing field. I love for the students to be able to get their full cost, but the way it's set up, one university will be able to give more money than another university. Now, they did that in the Southwest Conference in the 80s, but there wasn't any rule about it. They just did it. And we a lot of them got in serious trouble for it. But now it's legal, but it's still the same thing. Where some schools can give more money than others, that's an uneven playing field.
Thank you. Dutch, final word.
Being fourth is no advantage. To think one thing. If I had a magic wand, I think we could eliminate many of our challenges if it was possible for decision makers, and in particular directors of athletics across the country, to adopt and commit to a simple set of values by which intercollegiate athletics would operate with full understanding of what that meant. I think we could eliminate a lot of the things that get us out of bounds and present challenges to us when it's not necessary.
Thank you. In a time of rapid change in both intercollegiate athletics and higher education, we long for wisdom, and we've heard an awful lot of it from these four panelists. Would you join me in thanking them?